Today's episode contains conversations surrounding sexual assault, depression, suicidal thoughts, appetite disturbance, and extreme weight loss due to depression. Listener discretion is advised. So sitting with me today is the beautiful Sami Roth. I like that I can call you Sami.
Yeah, I don't like to be called Samantha.
Okay, so you have been told. Sami Roth, BFA in acting, a minor in dance from Point Park University in Pittsburgh. And you are the current Miss Butler County. As we can see, she has her beautiful sash on and her crown is behind her. She can't really wear the crown with the headphones, but it's uncomfortable anyway to wear it for long periods of time. It's so uncomfortable.
I don't know who designed them, but they're like flat. A head's not flat. Like it needs to curve
It needs
over.
like a little cone thing that you can clip your...
You don't have that.
And there's a lot of like clips, and you keep them on there so you can just put it on at any time. She's also the director of dance for Batavia. Did I say that right? Performing Arts Studios. I was afraid I was going to say it wrong because I feel like I've been saying it differently.
A lot of people do. People say Batavia.
Batavia.
It was created by Ermi Batavia. That's her last name. And
I actually know her.
I love her.
I know her.
She's so silly.
So Sami's sitting down today. We have a lot that we want to talk about. One of the things that I find really fascinating about you is you are so well-spoken. Everyone said that about you even before I met you, like how well-spoken you are. So
wow, I wasn't expecting that.
See, that's the fun part about sitting down with me is you get compliments. But I think it's important for us to point out like people's strong points, and especially for someone who's in the public eye as you are. And you have your title until November. That's a big deal. You've been traveling around now. You've had how many appearances as Miss Butler County?
Over 70.
Over 70. Okay. And in those 70, those are those all across the state? Do you?
Well, yes, actually. I feel like as Miss Butler County, I really challenged myself if I'm going to be Miss Pennsylvania or not, because Miss Butler County proceeds to the Miss Pennsylvania Scholarship Foundation. I want to feel like Miss Pennsylvania, and I want to show them like I'm prepared for this position. So walking away as Miss Butler County, I feel like I can say I felt more like a Miss Pennsylvania or like a higher title holder than a lot of girls, because I really took that seriously. Mm-hmm. I've went all the way out to York for appearances.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I briefly mentioned to you I did Miss Butler County twice in my life, like competed. And there's a lot.
My mom did it once too. She didn't get anything.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of preparation.
Yeah.
You have, not only do you have like the interview portion, which is probably one of the most important parts, wouldn't you say?
I would agree.
Interview is like.
It's 10 minutes long. I mean, that's ridiculous. I've been doing pageants since I was 6 years old, and I had what they call it round robin interview. So you sit with each judge individually. I've interviewed with people for a minute. So like, hi, I'm Sami. Here's one fact about me. And then I walk away and they give me my score. A 10-minute interview, sometimes I feel like my foot's falling asleep because I'm standing the whole time.
Well, you're standing the whole time. I remember when we practiced, we had a podium in front of us and they would tell us to step out from behind the podium.
Yep, you don't want to stand behind the podium.
You don't want to stay behind the podium the whole time, but what you're wearing, how you're looking at them, how you're speaking,
pressure.
What you're doing with your, like, as you can see, I use my hands a lot. So I had to be a little bit more, like I'd put one hand on the podium, I'd step out from behind, or I'd put my hands in front of me. Mm-hmm. Just being you're aware of everything that you're doing in your body, your face, the way you're speaking, how quickly you're answering a question. So
I always describe it as like being a news anchor. Like they're able to like keep their focus on the face while still having a really pristine body and talking about things that are engaging. Because in a 10-minute interview, if I lose them in the first 30 seconds, it's going to go downhill from there.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And then not only that, but you also have, I don't know if they still call it poised, and what's the portion on stage when you're in your evening gown and you have a question that you answer.
It's called evening gown. And then on stage question. Yeah.
Yes. So I remember that one. And one of the years I did it, they had them in a fishbowl.
Yep.
Do they still do it that way?
It depends.
Pull it out
Usually for the top 5, it's a fishbowl question, which is a broad question about why do you want to be Miss Pennsylvania. Yeah. For our on-stage question, now Miss America's changed so much throughout the past 10 years. It's had like 3 different owners. I can't keep up. But we are asked a question by the last judge to ask us a question in our interview. So Miss Pennsylvania holds all the questions and they get to Sami. And whatever the last judge that talked to me in my interview wants to ask, they can ask me anything. And I say it in front of 500 people.
Okay. And is it typically something pertaining to your platform? Or?
It totally depends. At Miss Pennsylvania this year, it seemed like everyone's was geared toward, it's called our Community Service Initiative, which is the same thing as a platform.
Yeah, they changed it. It used to be called philanthropy. When I was in, they referred to it as your philanthropy.
It's all the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it's funny how they change it when you're like, it's just the same. Like,
I wish it could just, I wish it could just stay the same thing.
I'm sure there's a rhyme and reason, but tell us a little bit, let's slide into that, what your platform is, or what's it called again?
Take a stand.
Take a stand.
I created Take a Stand. It's the real full catchphrase is take a stand against sexual violence. After experiencing sexual violence in my earlier years, I really found a lot of stigmas in a very broken justice system that's harmed me more than it's benefited me. And I wanted to create a proper nonprofit, a 501c3 that was really active in this community. You know, we have Voice, which is the Victims Outreach Intervention Center, and they've moved to Cranberry. So we have nothing in Butler. But I wanted it to be geared outside of Butler as well. But my biggest goal in the next 5 years is to have a building in the city so I can do a lot of work here specifically.
Okay. And I think you know someone in the city who might be able to
I do
help you with that.
Yeah. My uncle's Bob Dandoy.
Bob Dandoy. We love Bob Dandoy.
That's what I was saying. You brought up earlier, you were like, oh, people say you're so well spoken, and I was like, I'm not expecting that because I'm a Dandoy, and I grew up doing the little theaters, like people like Stefan and all these people that you know. I'm always getting yelled at, like, oh, like when I was Snoopy and You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown at the Butler Little Theater, all I heard was like, do this better or do this, and I'm like, that's what I was expecting to hear. Like, I feel like there's so much pressure to be Sami growing up in this town.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, when you go out and when you go out and you are successful and continuing to live in your passion, which both you and I know, like being in theater, it's not easy, right? It's hard. Yeah. You have to constantly be, when I lived
growing, you have to constantly be getting better.
I referred to it in New York as like pounding the pavement. Like, I'm like, you have to constantly, like your feet have to constantly, you're going to class, you're working with a coach, you're always doing something. Well, yeah, because there's a lot of people out there who are
better than you.
There's always someone better than you. Yeah. And everyone in theater, I have said this as well, everyone's replaceable. You're always replaceable, which that's not, I don't mean that to be like a negative thing.
No,
it's just
you
reality.
You have to stay growing.
You have to stay growing. And it's like, how do you, as like I've gotten older, like I'm morphing now more into like more like director side of, well, acting, I'm always going to act. But when it comes to dancing, that's a little different story. I want to get back into dancing, but I got some back stuff going on. You know, I'm turning into an old spinster. Anyways, I don't want to get off topic.
It's okay.
So something that I was really fascinated with that you shared with me that you did after your experience with sexual violence was EMDR therapy.
Yeah.
How comfortable are you like talking a little bit about that?
I can talk about it. So it's called, oh gosh, let's see if I don't butcher this.
If we need to look it up, honestly, so you can
movement desensitization recovery, something like that. EMDR. Can you look that up?
Yeah, let me look it up real quick.
I'll keep going as you're looking it up. So, long story short, it's kind of like hypnosis, but it's fully FDA approved. I just remember like, well, I didn't like to be touched at the time. So you're supposed to do it with like a tapping method, like tapping on your face.
Yes.
And it zones you out. Like it's supposed to help you like sink into the deepest part of your brain. I hated to be touched, rightfully so. I experienced sexual violence. So she used a makeup brush, which I found really interesting. So she didn't have to make contact with me. She did it with a brush, tapping my legs. And
so eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Oh, I was so close.
So a psychotherapy technique that helps people heal from trauma and other distressing experiences. Okay, so sorry, start that over again about would she use a makeup brush?
Yeah, so she used a makeup brush because I didn't like being touched, and she would just like brush my knee with it, which was like, because you want to be relaxed, and I wouldn't have been like sensory relaxed if I'm feeling contact. So the brush just like felt like my dog. That's what I visualized.
Okay.
But I remember the very first question she asked me. She was like, I need you to go somewhere in your brain that is safe and describe this safe space to me. And the first time I did EMDR, I described my safe space as an empty room. And it was this empty room. And in college, anyone who knows me would know when I was really processing what happened to me, I would go into a dance studio. I wouldn't eat. I was not eating at the time very well. And I would just dance for 5, 6, 7 hours straight. And I'd improv. And improv is like, I'd turn on music and I'd just free dance. And I'd find all these ways my body can move. But I couldn't be around people. Like the only person I wanted to be around was myself. And I find that really cathartic, like with everything I'm talking about, because as I continued doing EMDR, I would go in weekly, bi-weekly eventually, and so forth. By the time I was quote unquote done with EMDR, I described my safe space as a room full of all of my friends. So I think that shows the process so much in itself of how much it heals you, because my safe space went from
an empty room to being one filled with
people.
Isn't
that amazing?
Wow.
And I didn't even realize that, because they're really good at, when you do EMDR, your therapist, at least mine, was wonderful. I love her dearly. I still keep in touch with her because I have a different one now. But they don't really tell you any of that because they want you to figure it out yourself. Yeah. So she's just taking all these notes. And then when I finally brought that up, gosh, like 6 months later, she was like, oh, I've been waiting for this moment, like to address it. It was really cool.
That is really cool. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about therapists is I can speak to my therapist as well, is the patience that she has.
Oh yeah, they're wonderful.
To let you get to those places.
My nose is running.
That's okay. Do you need tissue? I have tissues over there. You want me to grab some?
Can I?
Let me go get them for you.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by R.W. McDonald & Sons Incorporated, Robert Stevens Jewelers. Thank you to our sponsors for your support on our first season of the Alter Ego podcast. Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. For a long time, I suffered with depression and anxiety. I had tried therapy before, but struggled finding a therapist I connected with until I found BetterHelp. That's why I am so excited to share BetterHelp's mission to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, because finding a therapist can be hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online. Remote therapy sessions, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. Click the link in description and receive 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. And by clicking that link, you support this channel. Plus, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. I was struggling for a long time, and BetterHelp was where I found my therapist, Whitney, who I still see weekly for almost 2 years now. So, if you're struggling like I was, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in description or go to betterhelp.com/alter-ego. That's betterhelp.com/alter-ego. There's no better time than now to start your mental health journey. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. So I do want to get in a little bit more into your 501c3, which officially, you said officially this year was when it became a nonprofit, right? You had started about a year ago. You also do a podcast through that, and it's survivors, right? Mm-hmm. Run by survivors for survivors.
Yes.
So how many people do you have like currently that are like involved in your nonprofit other than yourself?
Yeah, well, it's tricky because the catchphrase kind of covers it. For survivors by survivors. By survivors is really difficult because coping with sexual violence and working for a nonprofit about our specific trauma, it's really draining. I won't lie, I get drained by it too. So for the most part, it's me and one of my best friends, Olivia. She co-hosts my podcast with me, and then we bring in other survivors periodically to help us at specific events. So we did one at Pitt, and my friend Ashley, who's a survivor as well, she helped me at that. My best friend Lori is the only person on our team who isn't a survivor of sexual violence. She edits our podcast. She has a BFA in cinema. That was my roommate in college, but that's why I think it's so special for her to be a part of the team, because she's the one person that she is actually the only person on our team that saw me throughout the cycle of that. So she's really good at like keeping me in check and doing the behind the scenes stuff in a way that's yeah, it just keeps me in check. I don't know how else to describe that.
Well, you were also, not only were you a victim of sexual violence, but you were also a victim of
Institutional abuse.
Well, institutional abuse, and you were a victim of people who, of being a victim. Like you were made to, were not believed by a lot of people.
It's so interesting because what I always say, and I've really thought about this, and I think we talked about this too, like, no matter what I say, it was going to be wrong. Like, if I would have been the quote unquote like perfect token victim, everyone would have hated that too, because let's say I didn't speak out, everyone would have been so mad at me, like, why are you so quiet, you're everything that we describe a woman not to be. Like, people would have been mad about that. And I do speak out, and it's like, oh my gosh, you're so aggressive, and I can't control, like, there's you can't tell someone how to respond to that until you've experienced it. And even further, you can't tell someone how to respond to what has only historically happened to them. What happened to me can never repeat itself. And that's really exhausting and lonely.
Yeah, I'm sure that it is. And it caused you to have a lot of symptoms.
Yeah, it did. I have a seizure disorder. It's called PNES, which stands for psychogenic non-epileptic seizures. I do stutter sometimes too, because I feel like my brain, and my therapist talked about this too, my brain moves so fast, and like I need to constantly explain myself, so that causes a little bit of a stutter. And then I have CPTSD.
And what's CPTSD?
Complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is so much worse than PTSD, because it means that all of your traumas like to scream in your head and tell you everything at the same time. But before I had CPTSD, I was actually diagnosed, and I just officially got undiagnosed with it like 7 months ago. It's called acute trauma, and acute trauma means you are experiencing trauma in real time. So on top of like dealing with the CPTSD symptoms while I was in university, I'm being traumatized repeatedly, and people are wondering why I'm having these large responses and so aggressive and angry.
Yeah.
Because how else am I supposed to stay alive?
Yeah, of course. Well, it was your body's way of like coping, right?
Yeah,
It was like
exactly.
a coping mechanism. And I think that's what a lot of people don't recognize, that it's interesting how whenever you go through a trauma like that, a lot of people have that from trauma from childhood even. Yeah. And then they don't realize till adulthood that something that actually did happen to me. And then they start to feel all the feelings of that, like similar to what you're saying. And I think it's horrible. It's horrible, because then what you start to do is, and I don't know if you did this, but I've experienced this, where it's you start to feel horrible about yourself.
So much. And then the way I always describe it to people is, when you experience sexual violence, you have this really big boo-boo, let's call it, on your brain. No matter what you do, it could feel like the most minimal thing. I remember being in class and someone had to pull my hair in a scene, because I'm an actor, so we were doing like fake hair pulls for stage combat, and that's something that happened to me in my past, like having my hair pulled when I didn't want it. I had this huge reaction. I was screaming, I was crying, I seized, and people are like, well, why'd she react? Like, she was back there. And it's like, well, duh. Like, whenever that bruise, that boo-boo is left on your brain, if it's a scar, like, imagine having a broken ankle and someone kicks it. It's still there. Like, that doesn't go away, and it just kind of gets redug at.
I think what's sad to me about your story in particular is that you weren't taken care of, in the sense that you weren't protected when all of this was going on. There was a lot of, victim blaming, like I had said. People weren't believing you. So what did you do during that time, other than going into therapy and having probably a small group of people, like you said, that you had a room. Was she your roommate? The girl
oh gosh, I love her. Lori Esposito. Hey, queen. Yes. She's my best friend. We joke. Lori and I, when I tell you we looked nothing alike when we went into college, she had pink hair, very like edgy fashion. And I was like, Butler County girl next door.
Yeah.
By the time we graduated, if I show you a picture of us, we have morphed into the same person.
Oh, that makes sense though. Like, that happens.
It's crazy. I mean, we lived together for 4 years, so we have the same sense of humor. We call each other, and everyone will listen to us and be like, this is the same person. Like, I'm like, hey girl. She's like, what up? Like,
I love that. I love friends like that though.
She's my homie.
Yeah.
Love her. We've killed so many plants together.
Oh, the plants. I know. It's a struggle.
I'm looking at yours. Ours could never.
Well, I had to prune her recently. That's the only bud that's surviving. Well, because I was out for a couple days and I usually keep her in the window. And
is it from the Butler Forest?
No.
It looks like it.
No, I actually got that at, wait, where did I get that? See, now I'm thinking and I can't remember. Oh, Giant Eagle.
Is it a Kalanchoe? Is that what those are?
It's a great question. It spoke to me and I picked her up and I brought her in here.
Love it.
I had her in the window though, and that was drooped. She was over. She was down. She was out. And I was like, girl, you need water.
I have.
The fact that you know the name of that is very impressive.
Well, that's because I worked at the Butler Florist for 6 months.
See, okay.
Yeah.
That
I don't
makes
know
sense.
plants very well. What, if anyone,
and I do have my, well, this is fake, but that one behind you is real. And that one is, and those are still alive. And I've had those in here. So exactly a year ago on the 13th, my nephew got married. That's from the shower that was over the summer before. So I've had those since I've been here.
If you're from Butler, I would hope you're listening to this and you're from Butler. You would know my uncle's Bob Dandoy, which means that my aunt was Julie Dandoy, who was
she was the queen
of plants
and gardens.
So it's
and flowers.
really freaking embarrassing when I'm like, I'm Sami Dandoy, not if I don't say Sami Roth. And they're like, oh, you're good at plants. I'm like, that's a joke. All my plants are dead.
So here's what I have to say, and I said this to you when we started, is that you're 25, right? Your frontal lobe is not fully developed yet. So give your frontal lobe time to develop. You get into your 30s, who knows? You could then become the queen of plants.
Yeah. Apparently, my mom always says
it might take time.
She wasn't good at plants when she was younger. And
it might take time. I'm going to do this so you can sit. I feel bad that the mic is, I mean, you can still lean forward a little bit if you want, but that's
why were we talking about Lori?
I know you brought up plants. Your roommate?
Yeah, but why were we talking about her?
I was talking about like how you did have people that were there for you, that you had a support system. And I think it's just a reminder for anyone who's listening, who's either maybe they're going through something like this or they've gone through something like this, that you've got to find your people, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes those people can dwindle down. I've found in my life that when I've gone through like tragedy or really hard times, sometimes people sort of, they go off stage, right? Because they can't handle it. But you have to find your support. You've got to find your people. So other than Lori, what else was like, what kept you going? Because I mean, you finished school.
That was the question.
Yeah. I mean,
and that's what I wanted to say. And I laughed as I said it, and I still laugh because people always ask me, they're like, how are you so good at talking about this? Or how do you keep a straight face? When I talk about this, I don't cry. I don't get upset. I think I got teary-eyed maybe for like 0.5 seconds when we talked about this for the first time. Like, I just don't emote because and that's your answer, I've become so desensitized to it. I went through countless investigations. I've went through countless like court issues, meeting with lawyers, being judged by a school system, being judged by people. There comes a point where you just don't feel anymore. And I used to be so like frustrated by that and embarrassed. And now I'm like, one, it keeps me alive. And two, on the bright side, it's made me able to help people because I feel like of everyone on my team, I don't think anyone would argue with this. I do the most work with victims, and I'm able to walk away from it and desensitize myself and then go and be Sami Roth in my day-to-day life.
Yeah.
But that's the only way I got through it in college. I always tell the story. I would walk into my classroom and my classmates didn't like me because I spoke out about this issue. And if we were sitting in a circle, because it's theater school, we don't have desks. We sat on blocks or on the floor. But if we did have chairs, sometimes we did, we would sit in chairs in a circle and we'd be meeting with our teacher, and my class loved to take all of their chairs and move them. So then I'd be left seizing on the floor. But there kind of just came a point where it was like, all right, I'm going to have my 5-minute seizure. I'm going to go sit in the corner. My 2 friends that I did have in that class are going to come sit with me, and class goes.
I'm sorry. I'm so baffled by the fact that even at your age, okay, so this was, are you comfortable saying how many years ago this was?
In my past.
In your past, that you went through this, and to me, your generation especially is very evolved when it comes to talking about things and putting things out there.
I think
I don't want to be insensitive to anyone.
No, it's okay. I just want to like feed into that. I feel like my generation is so performative, and maybe that's the theater kid in me too. Theater kids can be very performative. It's like, I remember being at Point Park University, and we would have these assemblies, right? Like when Joy Ford passed away, and all these white students would be like crying, and all of my black friends would be like, stop it, like this isn't about you, like. And I just kind of felt that similar like dichotomy of how we treat victims or people in general. Like when people cry and they don't do stuff for me, I'm like, stop it, like you can be sad about it, but like let's actually do the work. And no one wants to do the work, and I really see that with my generation. It's like, let's share an AI generated photo about Palestine, or let's share an AI generated photo about how to support victims, and then not do those things in our day-to-day life,
but not actually do the work.
And if I can describe Gen Z, that's it in a nutshell, and it sucks.
Well, do you think it's because they've gotten so accustomed to social media and the power of social
100%.
media and the followings behind social media?
I think my generation uses social media as I don't want to say crutch, that's insensitive, but like, what do I say?
Well,
what's a better word? As a shield, let's say that. My generation uses social media as a shield to
not actually look someone in the face and say what they want to say, or
to just not do the right thing. Like, if you post it on social media, I'm in the clear. Have you ever seen Cyberbully before? The movie that like everyone has to watch in elementary school about bullying.
I know what you're talking about. I don't think I've actually watched
this
it, though.
movie that I feel like anyone in the school system could tell you that most of us watch. I'm looking at someone walking. Anyway, it's this movie that we all had to watch about bullying. And I remember watching and be like, this is so silly. It's never going to happen. And then it happened to me, and I was like, oh, Cyberbully was right. But everyone in Cyberbully is like, oh, we'd never bully her. Or like when they hear that this girl in Cyberbully, the girl that's bullied gets bullied so bad. Cyberbully. Haha. Get it? We're getting somewhere. That tries to kill herself. It's very serious.
Yeah.
She has a suicide attempt.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone's like so nice to her in school and so supportive. And it's like, that's the like blanket statement. Like, why didn't you do anything more than that?
And I think sometimes also when we're talking about special suicidal ideation or suicidal attempts, that sometimes it can go the other way. Like, I've heard from people who have experienced that, where then there's judgment.
Oh, it's horrible.
Because it's like, but that's wrong. And you're like, but unless you have experienced suicidal ideation, unless you have experienced something that has caused you to want to not exist anymore, because that's basically the overwhelming feeling. I can speak to this because I have had suicidal ideation personally.
Well, I had a suicide attempt. That's like what that happened during all of this. And like 3 people sat me down, and I was so disturbed by it. And they were like, like, welcome to the squad. And they were like, just so you know, everyone's going to look at you different. I can't describe it, but you are going to walk into classes now, and you're just going to feel it. And I don't know how else to describe that of like.
Well, when they said that, kind of like, sorry, let me backtrack for a second. So what I'm saying is that I think what's upsetting about it is that I feel like a lot of the population has had thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Of wanting to, a lot of people will just say die. They'll just use the term, I want to die.
Casually.
When you are in for me personally, was in an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
And I got as far as sitting in my room with a bottle of pills and a glass of water. That's as far as I went. I hadn't like written a letter or anything, but I have this like, I don't know. I think I'm like very open to whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And there was a voice that was just like, put the glass down, put the pills down, get up, walk out of this room. Mm-hmm. And I can't say it was a man's voice, a woman's voice. It was just something. There was a voice inside of me. It was like, you need to get out of this room. You need to put this stuff down and get out of this room. And I did, and then melted down. And it was interesting because my friend, I'm going to do air quotes for anyone who's listening, said when I came out and I told her, and it was the first time I had said it, you know, she looked at me and she's like, oh, I was wondering what was wrong with you. That was her response to me.
Yes.
And it made me feel so crappy about myself. And I was like, I just felt terrible, right? Mm-hmm. And then I was able to recognize that, like, I needed to talk to somebody that was actually going to listen.
Yeah.
So for you.
Well, you bring me to a point. When I had my suicide attempt, I was in a park. I was at the point in Pittsburgh. There was many a cop chasing me because I ran away. It was very like cinematic. Like my friends and I laugh about it now that like are still my friends because they called the police because I was a little cuckoo and I ran away. I was off the grid. I was gone for like an hour. I had all of, which also like, why did it take you so long to find me? Like we were not doing so hot. But the Pittsburgh police, everyone's looking for Sami Roth. They all know me by name now. It's a little embarrassing. Like I'm like, hey, Jeff or whatever.
Yeah.
But I get to the point, it's super dramatic. I'm like, they're not gonna find me. And there's all the cops standing in a line waiting for Sami Roth. But I didn't have anything with me. It was in my bag. I had pills with me. Okay. And they were like, well, we can't not arrest you, but we can't 402 you unless you're in the act. It's just also a big issue in our justice system to protect people. But I go and I sit and I start writing my note and I'm doing the whole thing. And then I kind of had that same sensation. But what I want to get into this because a lot of people that experience sexual violence, they don't realize what happened to them. And that happened to me. But this voice wasn't like don't do this because that sounds so cynical, but it wasn't like a don't do this because you have so much to live for. It was like a don't do this because there's more to your story. I felt like I was remembering something subconsciously. Yeah. So I literally like without like a dime, I waved at the police officer that was following me. Like he was sitting in his cop car. I was like, all right, put my journal back in my bag, put it over my shoulder. And I walked back to my apartment. Went back to my apartment. All my friends are there. Everyone's crying. And I didn't cry. I was like, hey. And I was super chill because mine was, it was so emotional for them, but it was so awakening for me because not even 30 minutes later, I make a circle of my friends and I'm just pacing back and forth. And I was like, start writing, like we're journaling. And they were like, okay, what's Sami talking about? Mm-hmm. Everyone thought I was crazy at the moment. And I start literally like spewing things out. Nothing's making sense. But everyone's like, eventually I say something and they were all like, oh crap. And I'm just listing all these stories and it's literally still on my computer. It says notes on stuff. And they start highlighting things and they were like, we don't want to talk to this or explain it to you now, but we think you should go to Title IX in the morning and talk to this with them. And I start reading these sentences to Title IX and I just remember her look at me and she sighed and she was like, I really want you to process if this wasn't you, that sentence, what it would be. And I was like, well, it's kind of bad, isn't it? She goes, well, it's rape. It's sexual violence or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. You know, whenever you said that about how like you sort of had this sense too that you weren't going to follow through with this attempt, right? And that's kind of what it is. It was almost like that's what I felt too. Like there was more to my story. Yeah. And I had this inside of me. It's almost like I started to feel, you know, people talk about the light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. And sometimes you're like, I didn't even know I was in a tunnel. Like, I don't even know where I am.
You just feel it.
You just feel it. And that's exactly what I had. I had this feeling of like, I started to feel myself climbing out of this hole that I was in. And it took me a long time.
Oh, same.
It's crazy, right? So it's almost like we want people to know like, I know if someone might say a light at the end of the tunnel to you, and it might just make you angry, but you have to recognize that you are here for a purpose and a reason. And
we all, at the end of the day, I think to some extent we all want to get better. Yes. I remember like in the beginning of being a victim or getting out of an abusive relationship, whatever it might be, we all sit and we all do the same thing. We go on YouTube and we like look for the inspirational videos of how am I going to cope with this, and you listen to everything and you cry and you're like, that's not me.
You have YouTube. We didn't really have all that back then.
Oh crap, I didn't think about that. Well, nowadays we go on TikTok and we go on YouTube and you're like listening to other girls and they're like, it's gonna get better, and you're like, shut up, no it's not. I want to be miserable, but you keep listening to it because you want to believe them, and eventually it does get worse before it gets better. I got so bad before it got good, but I just kept going back and I kept listening to those stupid YouTube videos, and eventually it worked.
Yeah, but the thing is that you went through.
Yeah, because you didn't stop.
You have to go through it.
It's just like what we talked about earlier with acting.
Yes, you can't set it aside and just be like, okay, I'm going to move on with my life.
That's not how it works.
Because for anyone out there going through anything, right? Whatever it is, if you're not going to go through it directly through and get into the hard stuff, and like you said, it does get worse. Yes, it sucks big time. And we can say suck. We want to say probably more, but it does, right? Yeah. But the thing is like what I see in you is I see this very, and it's interesting because you refer to yourself as this like theater, yes, you're a theater person, but also you can't change what happened to you, right? You can only change how you react to it. Yeah. And what you've decided to do is to make a difference, to be a voice, to be an advocate. So how do you see in 10 years... If I were to ask you in 10 years, because listen, you could set a goal for yourself, right? And on the path to that goal, all these other things are going to come up in your path.
Oh, doesn't it always?
But what would you say specifically with, take a stand? What you already said you want to have somewhere in Butler, right?
Yeah.
Can you see it? Can you envision it? Can you?
Yeah. Well, I used to work for the Net. I probably can't talk too much about that, but I did, and I always loved that building, and it's sold now. But when everything happened with that situation, I was like, well, I want to do good, like regardless of the situation. Like I want to make a difference in my community, and I know that facility did that. So I really want to have somewhere like on the island or somewhere in a struggling area as opposed to like a really wealthy area like Cranberry Township, and do the work. I want to talk to the people that people forget about. I grew up in Center Avenue, like that's my area of town. And when I would come home from work with these kids I worked with, all my kids knew where I lived. They'd find me, they'd see my car, and they'd all show up in my yard, and I'd buy them pizza or whatever I did. And my mom was always like, you're just the type of person that like continues work after hours. I can't do a 9-to-5 job. Like I need to constantly feel like I'm bettering the community or doing something. And yeah, I feel like I want a facility like that it's like we're not just here from 9 to 5. It's when you need us. I really would love to have something like that.
That's awesome. So that's going to happen. And there was
and I was thinking about that too. Like I really made take a stand. It was accountability for me. It was like, once I make this, there's no backing out. Once this is an official nonprofit, like you don't get to walk away from this. You don't get to not help people. You don't get to pretend it didn't happen to you. And that's kind of why I created it. I was pacing in my room for like months with my friends, and I was like, do I do this? No. Do I do this? No, I'm never going to do it. I don't need to do this. Other people can handle it for me. And I was like, no one's going to do the work. So I was like, once I make this, there is literally no backing out. And that's kind of where we are now. Do I get sick of it sometimes? Absolutely. Do I get drained? Heck yeah. But I'm like, it's there and it's doing a lot of good. So I'm not going to leave it. So yeah, to answer your question, 10 years from now, Take a Stand will still be here.
Yes.
There's
and
no
you'll have
choice.
Like a physical location as kind of your goal.
Yes.
One thing that you said in a word that I wrote down that you talked to me, like that you felt almost empowering in a way after you lost everything.
I'm curious to hear what I said.
That's all I wrote. I wrote when you lost everything, and then underneath that I wrote empowering.
I mean, I guess to some extent I did lose everything.
Yeah.
I lost my job. I lost a lot of weight. None of my clothes fit me anymore. I lost almost all of my friends to some extent. I lost all of my university friends. I kept my Lori. We killed some more plants. I kept like those people that like you think would be by your side, but many of the people that were my close circle, like my best friends, people I really cared about. I lost my whole class and I lost my university pride. Like, everyone wants to wear a Point Park University shirt or whatever school and like say I graduated from there. I don't get that joy, and that really sucks. Like, I don't look at my past and I get excited about it. Like, I feel like a lot of people go to their grad parties or whatever and like they want to talk about the good memories. I'm that kid that doesn't get to say that anymore. And I think my story is so interesting too, because when people visualize this stuff, I think we've been taught to portray it as someone that's shy or backwards, or like people that are bullied, or people that, I hate to say that, but like that society perceives don't matter. And I didn't feel that way. I was very much, in terms of like social status, I would consider myself more at the top of the food chain. Like, I was the vice president of my theater community. I've always been a class clown. I don't think anyone expected Sami Roth to go through these things. So then when it happened, all eyes were on me even more. And I really felt that. And to some extent, I think that made me fall even harder, because I was hypothetically like so high up. And like, pow.
How are you going to reclaim that? Because in my eyes,
that's a big question.
Yeah, it is a big question. You're Miss Butler County. So take a second. But how are you going to reclaim that? Because here's the thing. To me, that has been taken from you, and it was no one's place
right.
or right to take that from you. So you have you have a degree from Point Park University. You did the work.
Yeah.
You continued.
It's touchy, because it's like you want to do all this work and you want to fix it, but I can't even step foot at the place that did it to me. I'm terrified. Like, it's more than that. Like, it's
not even literally that place.
No,
it's
I
not
know.
Even, I don't mean like go back there and be like, I'm reclaiming my power here. I'm saying just bigger than that.
But even to more than that, like, the one thing I really want to do is I want to go and work with Title IX specifically and go to universities. But to some extent, that's really traumatizing in itself. Like, I really want to put on the big shoes and pretend nothing happened to me. I'm very good at that. We talked about that. Like, I'm really good at desensitizing, but I can desensitize as much as I want. And to some extent, no matter how far I jump in, there's going to be repercussions, like, of my body. Like, I'm going to sneeze, or I'm not going to feel so hot. And I have a full-time job now. I have a life, and I love that. I love my life again. I love my partner. I love my world. So finding the balance of like, I want to heal what happened to me and help others. It's just like, and I don't want to believe it's a lost cause, but I'm still figuring it out.
You're young and you have time, I think.
But I would say my biggest goal is fixing Title IX. I think that's, at the end of the day,
that's
where
really
I was
powerful.
failed the most. And I think Title IX is an absolute joke. And every university that I have talked to that I feel like makes the most progress is the programs within their university that are not Title IX. So I have a partnership with Project Safe through Pitt University, and we go there and we help with a lot of their stuff on campuses and fairs. And Project Safe is completely separate from Title IX. So it's quite literally students or a whole separate entity of the university pretty much being like, Title IX's a joke, we're going to help you through the process. And that's really sad. Like, the fact that universities have become smart enough to realize that the United States has failed us, where it literally matters where I'm told to go, that we need to make a whole other program to help people through that process. That's a joke.
I'm just sort of dumbfounded here by a lot of the things you told me. And I don't even know if dumbfounded is the right term. Like, even with the statute of limitations, specifically on your case, there's a lot of things that you're not I don't feel like you were protected.
No one is.
And that's something you want to change. That's a goal of yours.
So the statute of limitation for rape specifically is 10 years, which is lengthy. But what no one warns you or protects you for is, one, that's more than likely not going to happen. When you report rape, when you go through the criminal investigation process, if the DA doesn't pick up your case, if they don't find it worthy, if they don't find it what the media sees as a bad rape, like, rape's not what you see in the movies. It's not someone coming at you with a knife all the time, and that's all they want to take forward because that's all they think is going to win, which it shouldn't be like that. Any of these crimes are still a crime. It's not always that movie-esque dramatic. But regardless, if the DA doesn't pick up your case closed. It's always there. Like, it still exists until the statute of limitations is up. But if that person, let's say, doesn't do it to another girl, or if it doesn't become more serious, they're not going to take it. So that's 10 years. But the statute of limitation for a lawsuit, so getting money for what happened to you and paying for all of the bills that I'm sure you accumulated from therapists, from, let's say I would have dropped out of college and I wouldn't have made it and I went 3 years and I didn't graduate, that would have sucked. And that happens. I know so many girls that have reached out to me and have been like, I'm out $100,000 because I couldn't finish my degree because I couldn't be around my abuser. That's like always the story at universities. Anyway, that's only 2 years. And then the real kicker is defamation. So let's say your abuser coming after you or whatever, defamation never goes away. So you can only go after this person legally for 10 years. And then if that doesn't work out, you get 2 years to do it. Then when that doesn't work, or if you're out of time or you can't afford to do that, I mean, it's thousands and thousands and thousands. We're talking you could be out $100K to pursue this legally, which most normal girls or boys don't have.
Well,
defamation
a lot of
never
people
goes
don't.
away.
Yeah. And we're talking about, you specifically are talking about the age that you were, and you're in school, right? Yeah. So you're what your only option is to get a lawyer. I mean,
and you can't afford that.
And you can't afford that. So that's something you would like to change.
It is.
That's something you will change.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because
I really walked our first conversation. I really walked away with that. I call my mom. She's my best friend, even when she annoys me. I call her after everything, and I was like, Mom, I'm like pacing through the house, and she's at work. I always call my mom at work, and she can't always answer. Like, I just always want her to pick up the phone, but she did pick up the phone this time because she didn't have kids because she's a preschool teacher. And I was like, Mom, I just talked to Laura, and she was like, she just kept saying, like, you have to do this. And I was like, I have to do this. But my mom's like she's like the fact checker. She's like, okay, calm down. Like, you don't need to do this today.
Well, not today.
I'll be like,
but
let's go.
It's the power of your words. You know, I can see that you
reframing. Yeah,
it's reframing, and it's like, I'm very much on the path of it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And you know,
like that.
When you're young and you're eager and once you've started to take this momentum of what you're doing and see the difference that you're making, which, you know, you're a year in with your nonprofit and fully in since March, as it's officially a 501c3 of this year. But all these other things, you know, they're sort of sitting like, it's like they're sitting behind you, you know, and you're thinking about them. So to me,
I think that makes it so hard too. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I do think that makes it so hard too, because of how much happened to me, because of how badly these people hurt me, whether they realize it or not, which they definitely do. I constantly feel like I have to prove myself. Like it's even more than proving myself. It's spite, which is such a horrible thing that I'm constantly told, like, you need to let go of. And I argue that so vocally, because the only people that understand that spite is victims. Because I hate this analogy or like this visualization. People that have never experienced rape or trauma or whatever will always tell you, like, to heal, you need to let go of your anger. You need to let it go. You need to be able to talk about it and not hate those people. And I'm like, no. It's actually proven scientifically that there's like several ways to heal. And one of them is don't forgive and don't forget. And that's the path I'm on. I will never forget what happened to me. And I will never forgive the people that did it. But that it does weigh on you. And I won't lie that doesn't have its difficulties, because I take a stand, or I go through my life and I'm constantly like, I want to fix everything that failed me. And I want to really like make the people feel hurt. Like I want them to feel what I feel. Like I want them to know that I'm not done, and I'm not going to be done anytime soon.
You know, to your point of wanting to
justice,
create legislation. And that's when I said to you said, it will probably never happen. And that's when I snapped my fingers and pointed at you. And I said, don't use that phrasing.
I know.
And I was like, and the reason I say that is even if I'm not saying tomorrow, I'm not saying next week, I'm not saying next year, but maybe this is that 10 year. In 10 years, you're here, you've got the roots of your nonprofit, and then you start to get those wheels churning. You could be the catalyst for that, to get started, to conversation. That's how things change. It's, in my eyes, it's like you are taking something really, really awful, like really, really awful that needs to we need to be talking about it because it's happening to more people. And there's a lot of people who don't speak up because of all of the reasons that you just pointed out. But you are doing something to make it where people feel like they have somewhere to go. They have someone to talk to. And that's very powerful.
I do love my job because, like I said, where I created Take a Stand so I couldn't walk away from this, does come with a very large responsibility because I feel like a spokesperson for so many people that can't speak out. The amount of people from Butler County specifically that have, hundreds of people that have reached out to me, sharing their stories and like passing me the torch to do something about it. It's really cool, but it's really awful.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know how else to put that.
No, there's no other way to put it. There's no other way to put it. And you should be allowed to go on this and feel whatever you're feeling. I mean, and anger is a part of grief.
I know.
Anger is a part of grief. But
I think, and this is where we go back to too, like, however I would have responded would have been wrong. We have such a problem in America. I mean, most countries in general, but specifically here of like an angry girl being respected in the justice system or in general. Like even being Miss Butler County, like I feel like I can't always, like when I talk about it when I'm Miss Butler County, like I don't have my crown right now, so I feel a little more casual. It's sitting behind me. But like how I talk about it now, like there's still a pristine energy I'm expected to have.
Yeah. And while I understand, I also think that sometimes can close other people off to maybe opening up.
Yeah.
And it's not that we're saying that that's the wrong way. There's poise is one of the big things, right? In Miss Butler County and Miss Pennsylvania and Miss America, right? Having this poise. And that's not an easy thing to do, especially when you're talking about the subject matter that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But you still are human.
Oh, if I could get my phone. I write a lot of like slam poetry, and that is kind of what inspired Take a Stand too, because I wanted it to be, I didn't want Take a Stand to just be like a crisis center. I wanted it to be more of like an arts programming and more like coping strategies on how to deal with that. And how I really like how my story essentially blew up is I did a lot of like slam poetry and all of these like, spoken words, and that was what I was going to grab because I'm just like, I can't remember the catchphrase, but
go get it.
Okay. She competed in pageants since she was 6. Standing on a stage in her altered dresses, the girl felt powerful. She was nerdy, had silly haircuts, and missing teeth. The girl continued wearing altered dresses until her brain was altered too. This time, the alterations hurt, and pageants were temporarily out of the picture. Instead, CPTSD, assault, lots of painful seizures, and down nearly 50 pounds was the only photograph her eyes could take. The blame behind the focal image absorbed the foreground, making the only thing she could see other people's opinions of her new appearance. Along with her continuously fading glow, her dresses would no longer fit either. Get it together, she shouted in the mirror, but words didn't help. Altered brains take more time to fix than altered dresses. And so she swam in her oversized gowns. Sitting with the clothes the girl could no longer wear, fixation sparkled within her tears on shoes, realizing multiple people have the same size foot. If the shoe fits, wear it, she thought. While the altered dresses no longer fit and the altered girl was, well, altered, her reflection now gazed at her with realization. Dress alterations are much easier to fix than feet. She didn't walk away from the mirror, but instead shocked everyone turning it around. Feet are an uncomfortable thing to see in the mirror. And she said, if the shoe fits, wear it together. People did, and she came to accept and learn that they always will. She was okay with that though, because who wants to be around shoes that take away from beauty within alterations? Her dress would fit her regardless. And the whole purpose of that poem is talking about like a shoe is the stigma or something bad in society that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they have in the Miss America pageant, do they still do the parade of shoes?
Not anymore. Not anymore. Isn't that sad? I loved it.
I have so many.
We actually do it now through the Miss Pennsylvania organization. We do the parade of sneakers and we decorate a sneaker like our town. So I did Jeeps. I turned my shoes into little Jeeps.
Yeah. Oh, that was my favorite part of going to the Miss America pageant.
Me too. But now I get to say it. At least I got to do it at States, and my sneakers were pretty dope. And Butler Eagle did write an article about them.
Oh, all right.
I made them myself.
Yes, of course you did. Of course you did.
Yeah, I'm a little crafty. But anyway, like the whole purpose of that poem and like what we were talking about is like all of this attention was on me. All of the attention was on me that my clothes didn't fit, how I'm responding, how horrible I am. And meanwhile, I just want to turn the mirror around and be like, not only is my abuser an awful person, but you're really not much better than him if this is how you're behaving. And I feel like I was able to express so much of that through art. I was constantly writing poems. I remember I wrote one that was like, my favorite jeans had 6 buttons on them, which means my favorite jeans gave you 6 chances to not take my pants off or whatever it might be. Wow. I love doing stuff like that. And it's been so therapeutic for me and to share through Take a Stand. We have, it's called the Survivors Blog, and I'll anonymously let survivors share poetry or whatever they feel through my platform.
Wow, that's awesome. And how often have you performed those like in front of people, the slam poetry? Yeah,
that one was performed at York County when I was Miss White Rose City, and that's sort of saying I've done appearances all over Pennsylvania. They have the Victims' Rights March, which that's one of my biggest goals in the next like year is to get that in Butler. And you up the mayor, all of these people will speak, and it's just a rights march for victims. And then people share their stories, and I shared some of my slam poetry at that event.
Wow, that's really powerful.
Thank you.
Sami, is there anything else for the podcast that you want to share? Anything that we didn't?
Yeah, I guess just overall, like, I think I just want to like talk to a survivor that might be listening to this. I know I don't know like how to put it simply. I know it sucks, and I know like you're probably listening to this because I would have too and been like, this is not worth living for. This is not worth fighting for. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I thought that too. Like when this all first happened to me, I was like, I can't do this. I can't function. I don't want this to be life. And then my favorite thing when I found survivors, what they told me is like, you're probably going to lose all of your friends. Life's going to look really, really different. But what really snapped me out of it is they were like, you're about to have the most amazing, seizing, mentally ill friends. Like, my friends are so broken. They cry about everything. It's hard to get our jobs done. Life's very different. I'm trying not to cry. This is like the one time I'm actually getting emotional. I have never felt friendship. I have never felt pure joy in like activism and goals, people fighting for me, people that care about me, until I have found the sisterhood of victimhood and like the community I found through these beautifully broken girls. So I guess that's my goal for you is if you're really thinking about the negatives from everything I've talked about, think about how much not only I've accomplished, but you get to join it. Reach out to me. You could join Official Take a Stand. You can join all of these programmings and just sharing your story. Not only is it going to change someone, but I guarantee you at least one person's going to reach out to you and you're going to make a best friend.
Wow. I told you, well spoken.
Thanks.
And I'm looking forward to having more people who are looking for the support. And like you said, sisterhood. I think that's a really powerful message too.
It is. It's like the sisterhood of the traveling pants. Yeah. Like I have friends all over the country. I'm in the process of talking with Rider University. Someone heard about Take a Stand in my story all the way out in New Jersey. So I might be going to speak to Rider University's faculty about how they can help victims on their campus. And
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
you need to keep me posted on that.
I will. You just never know where it's going to go. I never thought in a million years that Planned Parenthood of Western PA would be sponsoring my little nonprofit. So yeah, just keep fighting.
Sky's the limit.
It really is.
Use that rage. Use that rage as fuel to your fire.
Don't get rid of the rage. I don't care what anyone says.
I always say it's like kerosene. Just add it to my fire. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm just going to let it.
Even if you get rid of the rage, it's not going to go anywhere. It's always going to be within you.
It's going to be, that little flame.
Use it to make a difference.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
You're welcome. We're very vocal on our mics. Sorry. Thank you for tuning in to Alter Eagle. Join me every Monday for a new episode. And be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Follow us on Instagram at Alter Eagle Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, stay kind.